Hi, I'm Valerie Engelhart, and in this video I am going to be painting Antheia, the Greek goddess of gardens and human love, and, well, Greek gods and goddesses typically encompass a few things, but the biggest one I wanted to focus on was gardens. Now the reasoning for that is all you can see right now is a blob, but eventually she's going to be wearing a flower crown. And so to get this started, true to my usual way of working, there is no sketch. But I'm going in much softer with colors, I'm using hot press paper, I'm painting small. And that's because I'm painting a person, and I'm doing this on mini paper because it is the time of year to start doing small artworks for small works gallery shows, which are pretty popular around the holiday season for gift giving. So let's get into what I'm actually doing. So right now I am using some green called On It Diamond Yellow by Rockwell Art to put in the base of the flower crown. The cooler tones in the skin and the hair, and eventually even the background, I'm using my favorite color, Palaiba Diamond Blue, also by Rockwell Art. The skin tone is created from Daniel Smith colors, Rhodonite Genuine for the pink, and Quinacridone Gold for that yellow tone. I'm going with colors that I've used before and am comfortable with. I put down a mixture of the yellow and the pink, and then lifted highlights, so you can see where I might have lifted some highlight of the nose, the cheek, and the chin. I want the background darker than my subject, so I went in wet into wet, putting in a stronger mix of the Palaiba Diamond Blue, and now I'm going over top of it with Lapis Brown by Rockwell Art. Lapis Brown is a lovely dark, kind of a like brown purple color, and I love to use it for shadows or anywhere where I need like a natural black color. So this goddess has lovely dark hair, and so I want to use my blue and my lapis brown to create those dark tones. Off to the side, not shown, is a reference image that I have isolated values, per the usual, and made it in black and white and a couple shades of gray. That way, I am focusing on shapes. So one thing, let's talk about the hair for a second. Yes, I am doing some wispy motions, but notice that a lot of it was painted just in a block of color. And then I'm softening some areas around the face because I like hard and soft, lost and found sort of edges. Also, I forgot to mention, but look at how nice that like leafy flower crown is already turning out. That's just because I added some salt and I'm getting some lovely salt texture. And not to mention, a lot of Rockwell Art paints are granulating and will even separate into other colors. And so when you put down that very wet paint, you can get a variety of tones, and that saves me a lot of work. It's really organic and often a fun surprise. Now another thing I want to point out is down around her like chest and shoulder area, I put in some stripes to suggest that there's clothing, but I didn't really use a color for that in a previous painting, and one thing I don't like about this particular block is it's only glued down on two sides, and I paint wet and juicy and bold, and so in my last painting, some of the black that I had used bled onto the paper below it, and so I decided to incorporate that by just pulling a little bit of it out, but not enough to distract from the overall piece. Now this goddess has some wavy hair, so whenever I do areas around the hair, I'm using curved brush strokes. And the brush I'm using for the majority of this piece is a silver black velvet round size 8 brush. And I have sped this video up quite a bit. This took me about an hour of total painting time, but I've got it down to under 20 minutes with the help of editing. Now I'm lifting some highlights out of the hair because hair, even though I like to paint it in as a shape, that shape is going to have highlights, midtones, and dark tones. Even though in my reference image, all of the hair, because it's dark hair, comes out as one solid mass. which is good for focusing on just a block of color and shape, but there are nuances in hair. And so that is something where I'm just sort of guessing. Putting in the eyebrows now, I'm actually really happy with how those turned out, and some blue on this side of her face. Well, as I look at it, it's the left. Stage left. Her right. Let's not get into left and right. We'll be here all day. So I'm making that part cooler because that part is in shadow. I'm adding more of the pink and the gold to some areas of the skin that are in shadow, but I want those shadows to be very warm. Under skin is blood, and so usually adding more of the pink or the red tones is a great way to build depth into a face without losing the liveliness of it. So now I'm painting in the lips, and we are still in the first wash. I have not paused to let this dry. And so I'm still just putting in shapes, like there's the nose, but it's not like really the nose, it's just the color that's underneath. And I'm just still blocking in shapes. And a lot of these can be corrected later, either via scrubbing or just layering more paint. Because this is hot press paper and I'm painting skin, I'm going to be doing a lot of glazing. And what glazing is taking a lighter wash of a color, a lighter value, and applying it to an area so that you like tinted a color. Versus like when I went in the background, I went hard. I wanted that color to be like bam in your face. But here I want things softer and with smoother transitions. And so I'm going to use more of a glazing technique when it comes to her actual skin. And in case it matters, Rhodonite Genuine is my favorite pink. It is slightly granulating because it is a Primatech color, meaning Daniel Smith uses like actual minerals to make it. And it is just, I own a lot of pinks. It is my favorite. It's nice and warm, transparent. It mixes really well with other colors. Quinacridone Gold is another one that I just have to have in my palette. So now I have let it dry, and I let it dry naturally because I did want those salt marks to form. And so now I'm going in with my lapis brown and I'm painting in the hair again. I do want to leave some gaps because this is watercolor, we subtract the light. So I am painting in the darkest areas of the hair. And I still want to keep this overall a large shape, but give some wispiness. And then I'll even drop in some other color. Just a little bit of blue to tie things together with the background and just bring a little more visual interest, but I'm still keeping the value dark. Now I'm bleeding away some of that hair into the background because I like lost and found edges, and therefore I can soften that area without it being a distraction. It just gives it a nice ethereal look suited for a goddess. And I am dragging in some of that hair color under her chin. That way it creates shadow, but if you can connect your shapes, I would highly recommend doing so. It keeps things from looking cut out or like paint by numbers. So if you can connect your shapes and colors, it just makes for a more unified painting. She has some really nice dark eyebrows, so I'm going into those again. All right, now I'm going in with my liner brush, also by Silver Black Velvet. It is a script liner size 1, and I'm not introducing any new colors. I have mixed a little bit of my lapis brown with my Rhodonite Genuine Pink to create the shadow on the lip. So yes, this is the line that separates the upper lip from the lower lip, but when I paint, I try not to think of things being a line. I try to think of everything being a shadow. I try to think of that what I'm doing is not painting a shape necessarily or a body part, but subtracting light. So anytime that I'm painting a shape right now, I am subtracting the light. Which is also why on the darker side of her face, I go in with more cool colors to have that area recede. And then watercolor does dry paler, so every so often I do have to go back into the same area and make it darker. And that is one of the things about glazing. Some paintings, like especially beautiful luminous flowers on hot press paper, I've known artists who will use like glazes of 10 to 20. But it's really important to know your pigments. Certain pigments, if you try doing that, you're going to start moving things around and get a muddy mess. So for those sort of glazing techniques, I do recommend knowing your pigments. Something that is non-granulating works really well, and highly staining. That means whenever you put another layer on top of it, it's not really gonna move. And it helps to, when glazing, you're obviously using really thin layers, going thin on thin on thin on thin means you're less likely to lift a layer underneath. One of the things I like to do when I paint is go in really thick, really fast, which usually works for me, but then you can't really glaze that very well. And with painting people, it's funny, I want to paint more like I would paint other subjects, but I naturally just gravitate back towards gentle glazing. But I'm happy that I can at least stick with my no sketch method of working. So here I'm starting to do the eye, and the eye can be really intimidating because we put a lot of importance on eyes. Also, if I get it really wrong, we're getting into uncanny valley. And since the rest of this painting is pretty realistic looking in terms of proportions, I don't want to enter uncanny valley. And this is where having the mindset of subtracting light and painting shapes really helps me out personally, because I'm not painting eyes, I'm painting the shadow in the orbital bone. I'm painting a shadow under a cheekbone. And it does help. Going back into the nostrils, tip for nostrils. When doing shadows in a nostril, one, at least on white people, the nose, I would typically want to use more red, especially if you're using a shadow. Using a little blue is fine, but for the nose itself, red or a red tone works really well. And so when you're doing the nostrils, you obviously want there to be a dark value. Use more of a red or a brown, or in that case, I mixed a little bit of my lapis brown with my pink to get that dark value, but don't use blue or purple or black. Use a warmer red or brown tone. That's my big tip of this video. Also, I like to think I'm a confident painter. In fact, I'll just go ahead and say it. I am a pretty confident painter at this point. But oh, was I still having trouble with the eyes. And I wouldn't say trouble, but I would second guess myself. I would put down what I knew to be okay, and then I'd be like, oh, but is that really okay? And I began to self-doubt. Even though as I go, gosh, like that one eye on my right looks really nice as it is, and I probably could have left that alone. So since I like to pack in tips, another tip I would have for eyes is the white of the eye isn't white. It will be a light value, but did you notice that when I was painting, I didn't leave that area the white of the paper? Because eyes have shadows. If you were to do like on Photoshop or any sort of art program where you can isolate a color using a teardrop tool and go and click on the white of the eye, it is not perfectly white. And what's another thing we know about the color white? It's a reflection of the colors around it. So even if you sketch first, which I've done portraits where I've sketched first, in your first wash, and heck, maybe even into the second wash, cover the entire eye with whatever color you're using, at least if you're painting fair skin. All right, I have mostly finished this, but now I'm going in with some gouache. I want to make the flower crown covered in like baby's breath. That is what those little white flowers are called, right? Oh dear, I didn't actually look that up. I just knew what I wanted. Correct me in the comments if I am wrong. So I'm going in, and I pulled out a lot of brushes for this piece. They're all various round brushes that I have, but like some are stiffer than others, or some have a better point, or are this or that or another thing. And so it's really funny. On most paintings, I can get by with just 2 brushes, sometimes even just 1. But on this piece, I pulled out basically a lot of the same brush, but with different enough qualities that I found a use for them in the piece. I am bringing some of those little flowers into the background and her hair just because this is a loose piece and I've seen these kind of flower crowns before. The flowers do go into the hair. It's really pretty. I've got a super fine liner right now and I've gone just into the green, but with very little water. And I'm putting in like little branches and deepening some of the values, creating shadow and giving a slightly more realistic look to the crown. And just those little flicks of the brush, just little stems here and there, make it more convincing and much more pleasing to my eye. It really started coming together for me once I put in little shadows and little twigs. All right, I go ahead and I sign it so that I don't mess with it anymore. That's another thing I do to try and keep myself from messing with it. After I sat on it for a little bit, I realized that lower corner on the left side, I needed to almost create like a vignette to push attention back to my subject. So I went in with some more of the green, put down a darker value, and then went in with the lapis brown like I have in the other corners and in her hair, just to darken that area and better frame my subject. And here's the finished painting. If you want to see more, subscribe because I make videos every Monday and Thursday. And if there's anything you want to see from me, let me know in the comments. Thanks so much for watching. I'll catch you next time. Bye!